I like the numbers that we're having up here. We moved out of the 50s and the 60s. Now we're seemingly going stable into the 70s. So that's a great thing. And I hope we can continue from there and be 100 one day. As Bill has already said, we're in a series of lessons concerning the, I might say this, that concerning the condition of the world today. And it's already been read in your hearing of Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5. If you'd like to turn there, we will be reading that again in just a little bit. So we learn from this passage that we see things in the life of others, and they seem to be big, but when we possibly do those same things in life, it's small, and we try to excuse ourselves. Well, that's hypocrisy, and that's what we're going to be studying about tonight. So we err in our own lives sometimes, and we excuse ourselves. And like I said, we see others doing the same thing, and it's a big issue. That's hypocrisy. So, and there's two thoughts on hypocrisy that we need to look at. So another form is hypocrisy is where a person puts on a good front. He is smiling, he's throwing up his hand, and you're shaking hands and all of that, but yet he's hiding something below that. And so hiding our own faults is what that amounts to, I guess. And I know no better example than Judas. At this time, as he was a money man, of course, we know that. And when it come to in the teachings of his relationship with Christ, the relationship wasn't very good. They were eating. He said, "Guy's going to be my enemy is sitting at this table." And I guess all of them thought, "Lord, is it I?" But that was Judas. And so then we read about him in the Matthew 26 in verses, Matthew, 26, 47 through 50. Let's look at that passage. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with the great multitude, with swords and clubs, and came to the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given a sign saying, "Now whoever I kiss is the one." So what he was doing is identifying Christ with his people that's going to intend to put him to death. And Judas said, I'll identify him for you. So he said, whichever one I kiss, that will be him. And so he immediately went up to Jesus. Now notice what he does. "Greetings," he said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. But Jesus said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" And they said that they came and laid hands on him, on Jesus, and took him. Now, hypocrisy doesn't appear in this text, but it's hypocrisy the same. Now Judas went to Jesus, and he wanted the people around there to know, boy, me and Jesus are just like this. We love each other so much. And at the same time, Judas was sticking a knife in his back. That's the man Judas. And so he would be a shrine for hypocrisy, because he was not interested in when he said to Jesus, "Greetings," and all that. That was just a build up. He wanted people to think that he was such a fine man. And yet Jesus died because of his identifying Jesus, not on that occasion, but he wanted money. Yeah, 30 pieces of silver. See, he wasn't thinking about Jesus dying and all that. He was thinking about that 30 pieces of silver. And so when we get into the money preachers, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, they would be the same way. They would stand and say, praise God, and do all these other things, and yet there was something in their mind that was going on all the time. It was how to get rich. And believe me, brother, they are rich. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Now, another form of hypocrisy, and I kind of introduced this in the introduction, is where a person puts up a good front and he smiles and he seems happy, but there's something going on inside. And so the managing of hypocrisy in our lives must, first of all, we must admit that we are a hypocrite. Hypocrisy doesn't sound as bad as hypocrite, does it? But it's just another form of the word. And God does not want us to be a hypocrite. He wants us to work on our lives and work things out in our own mind where we will be a hypocrite a lot more, less than we are now. And if we take the attitude that it's everyone else that's a hypocrite, not me, then we'll never change, will we? We'll just always excuse ourselves when we're a hypocrite, and there won't be any change in our life. So first of all, we must admit that I am a hypocrite. I have been hypocritical in my life, and I'm sure if you think about it, there's been times that you've been hypocritical in your life. So that's what I'm saying. We have to admit it if we're going to work on the problem. So surely we want to manage our hypocrisy in a better way. So Peter tells us in 1 Peter 2:1 that we are to lay aside hypocrisy. So this verse tells us we need to get it out as much as we can, and think about when we are out doing whatever we're doing, and we say something to someone, and we need to think about what we're saying to them, because they might know us as a hypocrite. We watch people, don't we? So we have to believe that everybody's watching us, because we watch people and we see things about them and hear things that they might say. And that's, of course, how we get to know people. So in Matthew 23 and verse 13, let's look at that. Matthew 23 and verse 13. Well, I know it's in this book somewhere. Jesus is talking to the scribes and Pharisees, and he comes down on them as hard as you ever see a person come down on someone else. And he's in all of these woes here, W-O-E, he calls them scribes and Pharisees. And he said, "But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You have shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in." Then the next woe, there's 9 of these woes that he talks about here. "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you devour widows' houses, and for pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive the greater condemnation." Then he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel land and sea to win one proselyte. And when he is won, you make him twice as much the son of hell yourselves. So they proselyte people and ruin their lives. And then again, woe unto you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing. But whenever swears by the temple of gold, in the temple of the temple, he is obligated to perform it. Then he skips a few verses, and then he goes down to verse 23. He says, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe and of mint and anise and cumin, and you have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. Though these you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. So we won't have time to go through the rest of them, but there are 9 of these that he goes through, and you can read them. And I know Bill has spoken about this passage quite a bit as well. And so then Christ gives the scribes and the Pharisees a scrubbing of the things that they've been involved in. But they have lives. We have lives that we live. And so they were messing up their lives. And there wasn't any doubt about that. And so all of these, he calls them a hypocrite. Now, the religious public, people now, we might have I might be a hypocrite, but that's just a small area in it. Now let's talk about those who are hypocrites, who they're called prosperity preachers. And their voice goes all over the world, and they have churches that will seat thousands of people. And he says, well, when I was preparing for this lesson, I watched a lot of the prosperity preachers, several hours really. And I took notes and things that they said. This is not hearsay, what I'm saying. I heard them say what they said. And many of them are like the scribes and Pharisees in Matthew 23. And so they are worldwide TV. And people see them. They have shows every day of wherever it is that they preach. But what they're looking for is this. They're looking for fame is one thing, and they've got that. They're famous people. They're celebrities. And that's what they were looking for. And they're looking for prestige. Look who I am. And they're looking, of course, for money. And but how they get it is what's going to make them a hypocrite. How they get the money. And so I'm not saying that just because the preacher's on TV that is hypocrite. But I'm saying that these ones that we're going to look at now are. And we need to know who they are, because we're going to be out in homes in a community, and this, a person might say, well, my church going is when I listen to Kenneth Hagin. There's one of them. We're not talking about him tonight, but that's just one of them. And so in doing this, though, they are greedy. That's one of the things. And they're also the love of money that they have. That's their center, is loving money. I want more and more and more. If you have an attitude like that, you never will have enough money, because you want and want and want and try to get it as well. So again, these people are famous. When I mention these, I see some heads do this, because you've heard of this person. Now, I'm not, well, again, this thought of being a hypocrite, we're going to talk about us in a few minutes, but the world would expect these people now, who are seen all over the world, the world would expect them to be honest people. They would expect them to be faithful to their wives. That's a breakdown with a lot of these prosperity preachers. I didn't know that so many of them have been in these marital situations. And we would expect them to be of good character and men of integrity. But friends, that's not what we have. They are not. They do not have these traits in their life. So some have chosen to be rich. And so they're there. They're rich now. But because they choose to be rich, they keep going and wanting things and want their congregations to give them things. And that's what's happened. Now, the first one we want to talk about is Kenneth Copeland. I see some heads already. I've seen him on TV. Now, he is actually a pilot. He used to be a commercial pilot. And that might say something about his jet planes that he has. I've seen pictures of his planes, and they're just sitting around like cows in a pasture. And he's got all of these things. You'd think, well, would one plane do him? Well, it would. But his attitude is, I want more. So the congregations will buy these things for them. And I've heard that he is worth $750 million. And I've seen figures lower than that, but this was one of the figures that I've seen. And not satisfied with just a plain plane, but a jet. They want the jet plane. And I believe that some of these people are in competition. Some of these other preachers, they're in competition. Hey, he's got 4 planes. He goes back to his congregation and says, I need a plane. Now let me tell you something about Kenneth Copeland. Well, his wife is going to say this. Her name is Gloria. And she said in these videos as I was watching, and she said one time they were looking out the window at the ocean, her and Kenneth. And a water spout formed out in the ocean. And here's what he said. I demand you, water spout, go away in the name of Jesus. And that water spout just went away. And everybody thinks that Kenneth Copeland made that water spout go away. I think it's ridiculous myself that people would believe such a thing as that. He didn't make the water spout go away. It's just silly. Might use the word stupid. But people follow that. They love that. And when she was telling stories like this, you had a scan of the audience, and people were actually sitting there with their mouth open. The people are gullible. These are such master hypocrites that people are just gullible. And they believe everything they do, everything they say, they follow that. And can you imagine at the 1,000, maybe millions of people that they're going to lead straight into hell? That's what we got out there. Now, this is such an amazing thing that I was just intrigued when I read it. Kenneth Copeland says, I am a son of God. Well, if we're saved, we're all sons of God. No problem with that. But here's what he said. I am the son of God, and that makes me a little God. When's he going to drop off the little and be called God? I suppose he's thought of that. But he didn't want to come on strong with that, so he's going to say he's a little God. Can you imagine that? I'm like God. He says, God is my Father. Well, if we're Christian people, God is our Father. But to refer to himself, and he's not the only one that does that. I think when a lot of these preachers know each other, And when they hear a statement that interests them from someone, they'll start putting it into their preaching. And I think that's what's happened here. Referring, just imagine you, stand up before you, I'm a little God. People will, ain't people gullible? It's awful. That's what's going on out there. Now, one of the he also says he's a prophet. But one of the best tests of a prophet is found in Deuteronomy 18:22, and it's so simple. If one prophesies a thing and that thing does not come to pass, then that man is a false prophet. And what of all the things that this man has predicted? I seen him one time during the COVID, and he said, we're going to get rid of that COVID. And he says, he don't say Jesus, he said Jesus. That's the way he says it. And you know what he did? He blew COVID away. He was standing there and he went, it's gone. Well, people died from COVID way after he was speaking. Why would people believe that? It's amazing what people will believe. So he is a false prophet. And we have this in Matthew 7, verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing. That's when he's standing in the pulpit and he's talking about the love of God and all of these things. He's a sheep, but it's in wolves' clothing. He says, but inward they are ravenous wolves. Pray to God that I would never put myself in that situation. First of all, I don't have airplanes and money. That's one reason I won't be there. So, hypocrites. He claimed to have healed thousands of people. He goes by and, when he gets through preaching, he comes down in the crowd, and here's a little lady. I saw this video. She never did raise her head. She was just sitting there. And he talked to one of her people who came with her, and they told him something. I couldn't hear that. But he put his hand on her head and he supposedly healed her of whatever she had. Well, when the service was over, guess where she was? Still sitting there. How's that for healing? And another situation. You can go on YouTube to see all of this. Another situation was a man was in a wheelchair. And he came out and put his hands on both sides of his face. And he prayed, and then he pushed him. Well, that wheelchair turned over backwards. And so he went around there and he says, he's not hurt. You guys get him up. He's not hurt. And so they put him back in his wheelchair. When the service was over, he was still sitting there in that wheelchair. Where's the healing? There is no healing, folks. There is. Don't be confused. There is no healing. One of his people that knows him very well, and I forgot his name right now, but he was somewhere across the world, and they had somebody with a stub. And here's what they said. They prayed for him, and they said his arms started extending, and fingers come out just like my hand here. Can you believe such a thing? If that happened, that would have been worldwide news, but it didn't happen. Why do they just barefaced lie about things? Because they want to be famous. That's why. They want to be rich, and they've succeeded at that very well. And so he claims to have done all of this healing, folks, and it just simply did not happen. Now, another one is Jesse Duplantis. Who's heard of him? He's in that same group. Same group. Now Jesse, he flies his $54 million jet. Yeah, he got one too. And he lives in a several $1 million house. I don't know how much, but they say his worth is $20 million. $20 million. I don't have that much, and I preach the truth. You can't preach the truth, folks, and have that kind of money. It doesn't work. So one of his foolish stories is that he woke up one morning and Jesus in his body was standing in the bedroom. And he said, "Hi, Jesus." And he said, "Hi, Jesse." And Jesse says that he saw a tear in the eyes of Jesus. And he said, "Is something wrong, Jesus?" "Right, is something wrong?" "Jesse, you're the one that's wrong." And he said that Jesus said to him, "I need you, Jesse." And then he faded away. How did he know it was Jesus? You know, a devil can look like an angel. And I believe it's what it was, if there's anything to any of it. So he claims to have made 3 trips to heaven. 3 trips. And he just knows Jesus like an old friend. Folks, we need to tell the world that these people are fake, they're hypocrites, they're liars. We need to know what we're up against and how many are they? Well, I suppose there are millions of people out there. I mean, sitting in these services. There's not that many preachers, but sitting in services. I saw a list of the preachers that were right along with Jesse and Kenneth, and there were 50 of them. And every one of them, you can go through there, every one of them will tell you what kind of lives they live. Or the moderator will tell you what kind of lives that the people are living. I can't, it's hard for me to fathom that. It's like saying, this paper is, I'm not holding this paper. It's that silly, isn't it? It's that silly. Now, in this matter of hypocrisy, time we have left, let's consider our own selves and our hypocrisy. I would be the first one to tell you that I'm hypocritical sometimes. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And you ought to be working on it because the Lord don't want you to be that way. Peter says in 1 Peter 2:1 that we are to lay aside all hypocrisy. So that's the Lord's will. That's what He wants us to do, is be careful with our hypocrisy. I believe that we're all hypocritical at some time. You'll have to determine that in your head. I don't know that. But I believe we all are. If we could think back at times and things that we've done and said, we would have to admit, I was hypocritical about that. Let's give this a check here. Let's say that we're in the line checking out at a store. Well, we see the cashier and maybe somebody she knows, and they're standing there talking. Groceries are checked out, they're in the basket, ready to go, and they're standing there talking. And we say, what? I need to go. In your own mind, I need to go. You get all, fussy about that. Well, listen, what about this? I know that I've done the same thing. Cashiers, especially if I know them, we'll start talking really while they're checking out the groceries or whatever it is. And there's people behind us. And I know I didn't talk for 4 minutes, but I lingered behind because we were in the discussion. And I suppose those people behind me said the same thing that I said. So we have to keep a lid on this, as it's said. Now in Matthew 7, 1 through 5, it tells us about some of these things, at least. In Matthew 7, 1 through 5. This is one that was read. So, to paraphrase, it is said, now, you're talking to me about my life. What about your life? So he says then, I've got just a little speck in my eye, and you got a 2x4 in your eye. How can we do this? Well, first, move the 2x4, then you can see clearly of the one that has just a speck of sawdust in his eye. But first, you've got to get your 2x4 out of the way. So before we come down on people, we need to realize that. Because our own lives may be a life of hypocrisy. In Titus and in the first chapter of Titus, we find this, verse 15. To the pure, all things are pure. We studied this last Thursday in our men's class. To the pure, all things are pure. To those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But even their mind and conscience is defiled. They profess to know God. That's what these preachers, they get in the pulpit and they profess to know God. But their works denies that. That's a hypocrite. And being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. So folks, how is it in our lives? If we are being hypocritical, and we can think of times probably that we were, the Lord don't want that in our lives. He wants us to get that out. And so we have to work on it, though. It's not easy. And James says, the tongue you will never tame. That tongue is liable to lash out at any time and say things that it shouldn't. And so it's the same thing with hypocrisy. It can just come up. And we say something before we even realize it. And so let's stop excusing our own faults. And the things in lives of others are so large. We need to, there used to be an expression, clean off your own back steps. Now, we're never going to be perfect. That's not what I'm saying. We're never going to get to a point where we will never say something hypocritical again. We're probably not going to get to that point, but the Lord wants us to try to get to that point and keep all of it out of our lives that we can. Well, I hope something's been, I have a couple of things I want to read. This one. Robert Bowman's references recent history of this heresy, the manifest sons of God. The doctrine this is the view taught by some of the Latter-day Rain leaders. I'm not sure who they are. And Jesus was simply the prototype of many divine sons of God. Oh, jumped the rail right there already. And his name is Sam Fife, like Barney Fife. And leading apostle and manifest sons of God represented as pure Gnosticism. he had preached the doctrine of immortality, not immorality now, but immortality, and he taught that the aging process had stopped for him. And he asked, when people would ask his age, he would just simply say, I am. He assured people that he would never die, but in the process of being changed into an incorruptible life. Well, he died April 26, 1979. Ain't people crazy? It's just hard to believe the things that people say and do. But folks, I hope that's not us. We have the truth. And our mission is to preach the truth all the time. And don't get off on these. I could tell you more. I've got more sermon, but we have to bring it to a close. So if you're with us tonight and your life is not as well it's supposed to be, maybe you're a big hypocrite and you're just concerned about that, and you want your brothers in Christ to pray for you as you pray for yourself. And then that's the first part. Then is to try to do better after that. So if you need to come tonight, the invitation is open. And we'll sure receive you and listen to what you have to say. And surely we can help in some way. If you need to come now. Softly and